Have you ever contemplated the true meaning of inner peace? This profound inquiry reverberates through time, finding its reflection in the sacred passages of Psalm 4. As we cast our gaze upon the Holy Scriptures, we find an emotional plea for tranquility and righteousness meticulously etched by King David. It's a cry that stems from a well of profound turmoil and unrest. Picture the backdrop: a mighty monarch, yet a man who, like every one of us, is familiar with the dread of fear, the burden of duty, and the harsh reality of vulnerability. Amid his turmoil, David doesn't turn to his legions or his riches, but to his faith. He seeks tranquility in the silent sanctuary of his soul, reaching out to the divine for guidance and solace. And this forms the very essence of Psalm 4, not just a prayer but a discourse, a dialogue between the mortal and the divine. It's an attestation of faith's power, the strength discovered in vulnerability, the peace that stems from submitting to a might greater than our own. As we gaze upon the words of Psalm 4 in the Bible, remember this: peace is not a destination but a journey. It's not a reward to be won but a gift to be accepted. It's not about evading our issues but about confronting them with strength, belief, elegance. The psalm is an invitation to self-examination and to seek tranquility within ourselves amidst times of distress. What does Psalms 4 really say to us? Let's delve into the heart of this psalm, verse by verse, and unravel its profound message. Psalms 4 starts with a plea: "Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer." This is a heartfelt cry to God for relief from distress, a universal sentiment that resonates with us all. It's a reminder that in our darkest moments, we can reach out to a higher power for comfort and mercy. Next, we traverse through verses 2 and 3. "How long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him." Here, the psalmist chides those who forsake the truth for delusions and reassures that the Lord hears the calls of his faithful servants. It's an admonition to trust in God and a reassurance of his attentiveness. As we proceed to verse 4, a call for introspection is heard. "Tremble and do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent." This verse implores us to reflect on our actions, to search our hearts and to strive towards righteousness. It's a reminder that introspection and silence are vital tools in our spiritual journey. In verse 5, the psalmist advises, "Offer the sacrifices of the righteous and trust in the Lord." This is a call to both action, to offer up our righteous deeds, and to trust in the Lord, a powerful combination that can lead to spiritual growth and fulfillment. Subsequently, verses 6 and 7 express a longing for God's favor and a recognition of his blessings. "Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? Let the light of your face shine on us. Fill my heart with joy when their grain and new wine abound." These verses convey a deep yearning for God's blessings and an acknowledgement of the joy that his favor brings. Finally, Psalms 4 concludes with an expression of profound peace in verse 8. "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." This verse encapsulates the essence of the psalm, a peace that transcends our circumstances, a peace that comes from trusting in God and dwelling in his safety. In essence, Psalms 4 is a message of trust, joy, and peace despite the circumstances. It speaks to us of the need to cry out to God in our distress, to trust in his goodness, to reflect and strive for righteousness, to acknowledge his blessings, and to find peace in his presence. It's an invitation to a deeper, more fulfilling spiritual journey. All we need to do is accept it. How do we cry out to God in our distress as David did? In the first verse of Psalms 4, David pleads, "Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer." This plea for relief isn't just a cry for help, it's a demonstration of faith in God's power to deliver, a testament to David's trust in the divine. Imagine the desperation, the raw emotion that David must have felt, surrounded by his enemies, his life hanging in the balance. Yet even in this moment of despair, he does not turn away from God. Instead, he turns toward him, crying out for deliverance. David's plea is a shining example of faith in action. He doesn't merely ask for help. He acknowledges God's past deliverances as a guarantee of future relief. You have given me relief when I was in distress, he says, an affirmation of God's constant presence and unwavering support. But what is particularly striking about David's plea is its simplicity. There are no elaborate rituals, no long-winded speeches, just a heartfelt cry to the divine. This shows us that when we are in distress, we don't need to dress up our prayers with eloquent words or grand gestures. God hears our heart, not our words. David's plea also teaches us about the nature of God. He describes God as the God of my righteousness, recognizing that our righteousness comes from Him. It's a beautiful reminder that God is not only our deliverer, but also our moral compass, guiding us towards what is right and just. So when we find ourselves in times of trouble, let us remember David's plea. Let's call out to God with honesty and faith, acknowledging His past deliverances, trusting in His power to deliver us once again. Let's remember that God is not just our deliverer, but also our guide, leading us towards righteousness, even in our darkest hours. Like David, we too can cry out to God in our distress, trusting in His power to deliver us. How do we respond when people challenge our faith or question our God? This is a question that many of us have grappled with at some point in our journey. The answer, quite simply, is trust. But what does it mean to trust? And how do we cultivate this trust? In Psalms 4, we find an admonition to trust in God. This isn't a blind trust, mind you, but a trust that's built on the bedrock of experiences and testimonies of God's goodness. It's a trust that says, I've seen God's faithfulness in the past, and I believe in His faithfulness for the future. Consider the many instances in your life where you've seen God's hand at work. Think about the times when you were in the midst of a storm and you found an unexpected calm. Remember when you faced a closed door only to have another one swing wide open? These are the testimonies that fuel your trust. But what about when the evidence of God's goodness seems scarce? What about those times when the storms rage on, the doors remain shut, and the challenges seem insurmountable? Here's where the trust we're talking about really comes into play. This is where we lean into the truth of God's character and the promises He's made to us. We remind ourselves that God is good, even when life isn't. We recall that God is faithful, even when we're faithless. We remember that God is love, even in the face of hate. This trust isn't about ignoring reality or glossing over the hard stuff. It's about choosing to believe in the goodness of God despite the circumstances. It's about standing firm in the face of challenges and doubts, anchored in the truth of who God is and what He's done. So when people challenge your faith or question your God, respond with trust. Not a blind, naive trust, but a deep, grounded trust that's been tested and proven through your personal experiences and testimonies of God's goodness. When faced with challenges or doubts, we are called to trust in God, remembering His goodness and faithfulness. What does it mean to find joy and peace in God's presence? This profound question leads us into the heart of Psalm 4, where we discover a joy and peace that are not dependent on our external circumstances, but rather are rooted in the assurance of God's presence. You see, the psalmist paints a vivid picture of an inner tranquility that is unshakable. Not because life is without storms, but because of the steadfast presence of God amidst the tempest. This is a joy that isn't dependent on life's fleeting moments of happiness, nor a peace that is merely the absence of conflict. It's a deep-seated, soul-satisfying serenity that flows from the wellspring of God's love. The psalmist, even in the face of adversity, proclaims, "You have filled my heart with greater joy." Greater joy than what, you may ask? Greater than when grain and new wine abound. This is a profound statement, as grain and new wine were symbols of abundance and prosperity in ancient times. It means that the joy found in God's presence surpasses even the highest earthly pleasures or achievements. This joy and peace are not a denial of life's harsh realities, but rather they are an affirmation of God's sovereignty over our circumstances. They are the assurance that even when life is difficult, we are not alone. God is with us, He hears us, He sees us. He understands our struggles and our pain. And in His presence we find refuge, strength, and comfort. As we rest in God's presence, we also find a peace that transcends our understanding. A peace that guards our hearts and minds even in the midst of turmoil. This peace is not a passive resignation to fate, but a confident trust in God's unfailing love and faithfulness. In God's presence, we can find a joy and peace that surpass all understanding, regardless of our circumstances. God's presence is not a place we visit, but a reality we inhabit. It is not a momentary escape, but a constant abode. And in this abode, we find a joy and peace that are truly beyond words. How can we apply the lessons from Psalms 4 to our lives today? Let's delve into this together, shall we? Psalms 4, like many other biblical passages, is rich with wisdom and guidance that we can incorporate into our day-to-day existence. Firstly, let's consider the practice of prayer. Psalm 4 opens with a heartfelt plea to God, a conversation that carries with it a profound sense of trust and faith. It's a reminder for us to cultivate a habit of prayer, to converse with God in our moments of joy, sorrow, uncertainty, or gratitude. Prayer need not be complicated or lengthy. It is simply a genuine conversation with God, a space where we can lay bare our soul's hopes and fears. And in return, we receive His guidance, solace, and peace. Let's consider the plea for relief in Psalms 4. It reminds us that God is our refuge in times of distress. Life can often be a tumultuous journey, filled with ups and downs, joy and sorrow. But in those moments when we feel overwhelmed, we can find solace and strength in God. We can trust Him with our worries and anxieties, knowing that He is our rock and our refuge. Trusting in God during challenging times not only strengthens our faith, but also brings us peace and comfort. Finally, let's reflect on the joy and peace found in God's presence, a recurring theme in Psalms 4. It's about recognizing that true happiness and contentment come from God. In a world that often equates happiness with material possessions and achievements, Psalms 4 serves as a gentle reminder that our joy and peace stem from a deeper source, God's love and presence in our lives. This doesn't mean we should abandon our ambitions or stop seeking growth. Rather, it's about grounding ourselves in the understanding that our worth is not determined by worldly standards, but by God's love for us. It's also about embracing stillness. In our fast-paced world, we often forget to pause, to breathe, to experience the beauty of the present moment. Psalms 4 encourages us to find joy in the quiet moments, to listen to the whispers of God in the silence, and to find peace in His presence. So, how can we apply Psalms 4 to our lives? By cultivating a habit of prayer, trusting in God in times of distress, and finding joy and peace in His presence. It's about creating a spiritual practice that nurtures our relationship with God, strengthens our faith, and brings us closer to His divine love. May we find the strength to trust, the courage to find joy, and the peace that comes from God's presence as we apply the lessons from Psalms 4 to our lives. As we conclude, let us take a moment to reflect on Psalms 4. Throughout our journey today, we have delved into the heart of this psalm, exploring its call to reflection, its plea for relief, and its encouragement to place our trust in the divine. We've unraveled the joy and peace found in God's presence and looked at how we can apply the wisdom of Psalms 4 to our own lives. In the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, it's easy to lose sight of these profound truths. Remember, the essence of this psalm is about seeking peace and righteousness. It's about turning to God in times of distress and finding comfort in His presence. Let this psalm inspire you to cultivate inner peace, to trust in the divine, and to find joy in His presence. As we part ways today, carry these words in your heart. May the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus.